During World War I, a psychologist oddly treats his patient but ends up sleeping with her. Find out more about their relationship in today's drama thriller, A Dangerous Method. Now just sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie with relaxed recaps. The movie begins in 1904, Switzerland, where a few men are forcefully carrying a woman somewhere. The woman's name is Sabina, and she is suffering from a mental disorder called hysteria, a disease where a patient loses control of her emotions. So Sabina is brought into a psychiatric hospital for treatment. A young Swiss doctor, Carl Jung, will be responsible for treating her. Jung tells her that they'll just talk for an hour or two on most days for the treatment. He believes in the concept of word association to determine his patient's condition. Now, Jung sits behind Sabina, so she doesn't feel intimidated. He asks what triggers her attack, and Sabina replies humiliation. Any sort of humiliation makes her sweat. When she was a kid, her father used to hit her, then made her kiss his hand. Then, Jung is with his pregnant wife Emma, and he's reading Sabina's papers. He learns that Sabina is well educated and aspires to be a doctor one day. Jung tells Emma that this method of treatment, the talking cure, was proposed by Dr. Freud, but he still hasn't laid out a basic outline for the psychoanalysis, so Jung might be the first person to try it out. Later, Jung goes for a walk with Sabina and tries to learn more about her condition, but Sabina gets angry and throws her coat. When he picks it up, he hits it with his stick. It triggers Sabina's disorder. She snatches the coat from him and asks to get back to the asylum. After some time, Jung visits her and tells her that he has talked with the head director about her interest in medicine. Now, Sabina can occasionally help him in his research. Then, Jung performs a word association on Emma, while Sabina helps in collecting empirical data. He uses some words, and Emma has to say the first word that comes to her mind after hearing it. After the procedure, Sabina concludes that his wife is thinking a lot about her pregnancy, which is obvious, but she is also worried that Jung is losing interest in her. Jung gets impressed by Sabina's analysis. After some time, Emma gives birth to a baby girl and apologizes to Jung for not giving a boy. He asks her to stop being ridiculous as he's happy with a girl too. During his next session with Sabina, he dives deeper into her memories. Sabina reveals that when she was 4, she broke a plate, so her dad spanked her naked. But she actually liked it, and it got her all excited. From then, any sort of humiliation turned her on, and that's why she snatched her coat when Jung was hitting it. That's why she feels that she should never be released from the asylum. 2 years later, Jung and Emma come to visit Vienna to meet Dr. Sigmund Freud. Freud asks how Sabina is doing, and Jung says she's much better now. They have enrolled her in a medical school, and she's doing extremely well. Then, the two spend hours talking about psychoanalysis and how dreams affect people's minds. They spent 13 hours discussing their ideas and theories, and Jung returns to Switzerland. He meets Sabina and tells her that Freud is not exactly what he had imagined. He's obsessed with the idea of representing every symptom in sexual terms, and his followers are deeply unimpressive. But Jung believes there are reasons other than sex, and he wants to follow his own ideas. Sometime later, Sabina asks if she could be a good psychiatrist, and Jung says yes. He's heard only good things about her university report, and she's exactly the kind of person they need. Now, Freud writes a letter to Jung and requests him to take care of a brilliant but erratic psychoanalyst, Otto Gross, and he needs to keep Otto with him until October. Jung learns that Otto was abused by his father, and he's a big believer in polygamy. Whereas Jung loves his only wife Emma and finds monogamy more logical. Otto even tries to convince Jung to have sexual relationships with his patients, but Jung is adamant and he thinks of it as weird. After some time, he meets Sabina again, and she expresses her idea of sexuality. She says she has been studying a great deal of sexual subjects at the university, so she's now more aware of the fact that she has no sexual experience. Then, she suddenly kisses Jung and asks him to come to her building if he wants to take the initiative. Jung later talks to Otto, who asks him to simply go to Sabina's building and give her the simple pleasure she wants. Jung is still unsure if this is right, but Otto has some powerful convincing tricks. After that, Otto gets physical with a worker in the asylum and then escapes the place using a ladder. Jung visits his room and finds his work on polygamy and sexual pleasures. He somehow gets convinced by it and goes to meet Sabina. The two immediately get intimate and indulge in sexual activity. With that, Jung takes her virginity. The following day, Emma gifts Jung a boat with red sails that he always wanted. This simple act of love puts him in a dilemma of whether he should continue his affair or not. But Sabina convinces him to continue the affair and asks him to be ferocious with her and punish her, similar to what her father used to do. Meanwhile, Emma gives birth to a baby boy, and Jung is delighted to see him. But soon enough, he ends up making love with Sabina in the boat. Time passes by, and Jung goes to meet Freud. Freud says he should have never sent Otto to him, but Jung says that he helped him crystallize a lot of his thinking. With Otto gone, Freud wants to adopt him as his heir, but Jung is not so sure about it. He expresses his desire of studying telepathy and parapsychology, but Freud only wants him to focus on sexual theory. Jung blatantly says that he doesn't agree with him, and suddenly, a wood cracks. Jung says he knew something like this would happen, as he felt a sensation in his diaphragm. Freud thinks this is ridiculous, but Jung predicts that it would happen again. And it happens. The wood cracks. Freud still thinks this is a coincidence, which confirms Jung's suspicion of him being close-minded. Then we see Jung spanking Sabina, and he gets all excited about it. Apparently their affair is still going on. One day, Jung takes Freud out for a boat ride. Freud reveals that there's a rumor going around in Vienna. The rumor is that Jung has taken one of his patients as his mistress. He denies the allegation, and Freud believes him. Jung talks to Sabina about this later and says he feels guilty and divided, so he decides to end the affair. But she tries her best to stop him. Jung reluctantly leaves from there. One day, Sabina angrily walks into Jung's office and questions why he told her mother about the affair. He replies that her mother already knew about it. He'd made a stupid mistake by getting into this affair, and from now on, he's just a doctor and she is his patient. Sabina gets infuriated by this and takes a knife from the table and cuts his face. Jung looks on in disbelief as she leaves from there. Now, Sabina writes a letter to Freud and asks him to meet him, as it'll be beneficial to both of them. She also mentions her physical relationship with Jung in the letter, so Freud writes a letter to Jung and asks him about this woman. But Jung replies that she was just his friend, and this is probably an attempt to get revenge as he didn't fall into her seduction techniques. Jung also requests Freud to act as an intermediary between them, as this woman has already brought him a lot of pain. Freud believes Jung and sends a reply to Sabina. He denies meeting her and says that Jung is not capable of such shabby behavior and that they should sort out their matter themselves without involving an intermediary like him. This reply breaks Sabina's heart, so she again goes to meet Jung in his office. To her surprise, Jung is already preparing to leave. She apologizes if he has to leave because of her, but Jung says he was going to leave anyway. Then she confronts him about denying their relationship to Freud. He says it's none of his business, but Sabina wants him to write a letter to Freud and tell everything, so Freud can take her as his patient. He reluctantly agrees and informs her that he's going to America. Sabina says it's good for him and then leaves the office. Freud gets the letter from Jung confessing about his relationship, so he writes to Sabina and apologizes. He appreciates her way of handling the dispute and also agrees to meet her. Freud and Jung then get on the ferry to leave for America, where they'll show their theories of psychoanalysis to the rest of the world. But even on the ferry, they disagree with each other on numerous points, and a crack in their friendship is clearly felt. After Jung describes his dream for analysis, Freud refuses to describe his dream, and this pisses off Jung. Even during the conference, they point out each other's mistakes and go back and forth with arguments. This further solidifies the bitterness in their relationship, and everyone thinks of them as rivals. After some time, Sabina meets Jung in Switzerland to work on her dissertation. However, they get into their physical relationship once again, and Jung asks her to not leave this time. But she is determined and decides to leave this time. 2 years later in Vienna, Sabina is now a psychiatrist and meets Freud to discuss her theory. She believes that sexual activity is both a productive and destructive act, as it can create a new being out of two people's destruction. And Freud and Jung should work together to solidify the basis of psychoanalysis. But Freud doesn't want to work with Jung due to their differences. However, he still assigns some of his patients to Sabina. Jung and Freud exchange letters for a while trying to resolve their dispute, but to no avail. So Freud decides to end his relationship with him and writes the final letter. 1 year passes, and Sabina meets Emma one day in her garden. She's now married and pregnant. After some chatting, Emma asks Sabina to help Jung. He's not himself since he stopped talking to Freud, and he's not properly sleeping. Sabina agrees and goes to talk to Jung. She sits next to him and realizes that he's not like what he used to be. Jung reveals that he keeps having an apocalyptic dream where a flood causes thousands of people to die and it causes him to not sleep properly. The topic changes to Freud, and Jung reveals that Freud lost him when he refused to share his dream so he can protect his authority. And Jung wants to develop a way where they don't just treat patients, but they help them discover what they can be. Jung confesses that he still wants to be with Sabina, but there's nothing he can do now. Then, at the end of the movie, we learn that Otto starved to death in Berlin. Freud was driven out of Vienna by the Nazis and then died due to cancer. Sabina trained some of the most distinguished analysts in the Soviet Union, but was shot in a local synagogue. And Jung recovered from a nervous breakdown to eventually become the leading psychologist and died peacefully in 1961. That was it for today, guys. Subscribe to Relaxed Recaps for more content like this. Until next time.